Okay, how many do people know Wayne's work? Would you like to see a little clip of what his work looks like? Okay, I think this is. We got some sound. So this would be. This is the beginning of the piece called Dyad. That's just a taste. It's a way, just a taste, to give you a sense, just give your eyes a sense of the sort of, this is his current company pretty much. So there's clearly a ballet, a lot of them are ballet trained now, which has been interesting. But if we stay on that theme of trying to get a sense of, so this is sort of the finished work, and this is what they look like in the early stages of the creative process. Pretty dark, but I think you get the idea. Notebooks, the white things, the things you can see, are notebooks lying on the floor, returning to the notebooks, working out an idea. So what kind of idea is that? You know, is that an idea in the body, or is that an idea, is that a concept? That this is Jess here. And these are the kinds of things we became interested in having a better grasp of. You know, what kind of idea is it? And where is it coming from? And how is it that it's being explored and extended? And Wayne inspires this kind of working condition, and other choreographers do too. They inspire a very collaborative working context in the early stages like this. And these they're usually set material. So you'll see her working a little bit there. I mean, Jess is the one. You'll see them working a little bit here, and then she'll kind of go back, and then she'll repeat it again, and then she'll come here. Then she'll find something, explore it, discover something, another nuance. Okay, kind of keep that. Paolo doesn't set material very easily, so he's just wandering around, testing things out, and then maybe he'll set it later. So they each have very different styles of doing this. But again, this was something we became better able to explore and exchange and discuss with them. And we did this as a kind of residency period where, and I think in the blurb where we began, years later actually, began to develop these idea of choreographic thinking tools. I think the lights are okay. Yeah. This has been a slow, as I said earlier, I think we started 10 years ago or more now, so it's been a process that had no aim. There wasn't a goal to produce these tools. We didn't know that we were going to be doing that until sometime after we established the relationships. So we didn't start in 2001 with the plan to produce these tools. It's something that just evolved out of this process. So that we don't focus too much on only Wayne's work, because many choreographers, and I'll give you just a few famous examples, and there are lots of many non-famous and other examples of people who work with these kinds of ideas, of working with tasks or instructions to produce, generate, and there are other words for this, generating and producing movement material. You may not, as a choreographer, you may wish not to use those kinds of words, but they're the kinds of words that Wayne would tend to use. This is a drawing that Trisha Brown made in 1975, using these points in space and giving the dancers a task to translate a sentence. I don't know if you can see from up there, but there is, on the bottom row here, there's a sentence that says, that starts with Trisha Brown was born in, and I believe it goes on for a ways. And the letters are translated to numbers. It's in the sequence of the alphabet. So the algorithm is very simple. It takes a letter, and it translates to that into whatever number would it be associated with that letter. With T, the number 20 is associated with it. So you make that translation from the letter to the number, and then the number is in the space of the box, and the box you imagine around you in space. So again, we come to that use of the imagination, to the ability to visualize that and move at the same time. And she used this to create dance material in the 70s and produce, this was the piece Locus, which came directly out of that work, and a piece called Set and Reset, which is much later. And you'll see, I think you can tell from the still photo, that there's a remarkable difference in the bodies on the bottom and the bodies up top. These are not the same dancers. Somebody asked me that before. And one of the instructions here was that your body parts are not assigned to those points. That you could use any body part to, you could look at the point, you could point at the point, you could move towards the point, you could kick at the point, you could jump through the point, all kinds of things you could do with the point. None of that was determined. But there were, I'm imagining, you have a kind of, so you have a very strong concept that produces movement. And what happens over time to the body that is constantly solving that kind of problem, to produce movement in that imagined space with those kinds of instructions? And one of the things you might speculate, and it's partly speculation because I haven't studied Trisha's work a lot, but I did hear her say once that this release technique that she's associated with sometimes came not because she imagined she developed the technique, the release technique. It came from these kinds of dance-making machines. These are referred to. So in other words, this thing makes you move in a certain way. So after you find new patterns of movement. So I think it's interesting to speculate whether or not working this way. Now remember, these aren't the same dancers, but you see there's a lot more torque in the body. That's the one thing. So a lot more twist. So you can imagine that they're moving in different directions at the same time from different parts of the body. So that leg's going out there at the same time. The head's going around here and the arm's going back there. So I find it interesting to think about how that, as an idea, as a concept of space, a concept of where the imagination, where the attention should be placed when you're moving, has produced very different looking bodies. I think that you could explore a similar idea with, you could explore a similar idea with these imagination tools of William Forsythe called improvisation technologies. And there are about, what he does here, and I'll just play this here for a minute.
In room writing, you're going to imagine a room, its
little
architecture and its contents, and you're going to analyze the architecture and the contents for its geometric content. In other words, a doorknob is a circle, for example, let's say. And so I might describe that with 2 points like this. Now, I have this imaginary doorknob in front of me, yeah? And in room writing, what we're going to do, in one case of room writing, we're going to take that doorknob and knock it off the door, okay? And the purpose of doing that is simply to take me off place. So I'm going to describe the doorknob, and it's a little lower. Well, and then knock that in place.
So these are in the CD-ROM, which you can buy, and this was made as a kind of manual for his own dancers. Before it was published, you can buy it now, but it was really made for his own dancers, new dancers coming into the. Do you know this? Are you familiar with this CD? Yes. Good. Well, it was originally devised for new dancers coming to the company because he had many of these. Think of these as little movement principles, and he had dozens and dozens of them. Little ideas that involve language. So it's named. There's a naming. There's something there's a concept that the body has to sort of assimilate, and there's also a visualization. So the room writing, he's actually saying, look in the space, pick an object, and then find a way to translate that object in space into your body. So that's not unlike Wayne's, the thing that I described extruding earlier. So it's using a lot of the dancer's ability to visualize things, make choices about the things they're visualizing in space while they're moving. From the cognitive psychologist's point of view, that's complicated. And this is one of the reasons they found it interesting to study with us. And so the other remark to make is that Bill developed these ideas before any of these drawings were made on top of them. So this is already in his body. It's already, the language is already in the company. And then he made this tool for new dancers coming to the company to give them more of the language and more of the concepts. They still had to practice them. And then eventually they published it as a CD-ROM, which you can purchase. But one of the things that that he said in an interview, which I think is useful, and it helps us maybe think about the type of cognition that's going on, because it's not that there's not, but the interesting thing that people say, well, if you're improvising, then it's more purely intuitive. I mean, it wouldn't be unusual to hear people talk about dancing as, really corporeal, full of emotions and intuition and spontaneity. Yes, those things are all happening, but at the same time, there's decision-making, choices being made. There's the recognition of certain patterns in space. There is a kind of thought. There is something going on, and I think that's the one sentence that Bill said about this technique is that it's a way of taking mental note of what just happened. So he does two things there. He says, well, it's possible to make a mental note, so it's possible to notice something as it's going by. It's also that things are happening. In other words, you're improvising. So this is like a vocabulary that's in their bodies. After they practice it enough, it's in their bodies, so they don't, it's not that it dictates where they're going to move. So it's, this parallel shear here, it's not that when they're performing and they're thinking, oh, that, for one thing, when you're really moving fast, it's impossible to actually visualize really precisely something like that. It's just about a mental note. But it's enough. The mental note is enough to shift your attention and to augment your experience. And from Bill's perspective, and perhaps the audience's perspective, one of the things you might question, and you may want to ask this kind of question later, do the audiences, if the dancers are thinking so hard, or thinking and experiencing so much, what is it that the audiences see? Do the audiences see this shape in space? Or is it important that they see this shape in space? That's something we could certainly discuss. Trisha Brown, I read someplace, said that when she first had the dancers performing Locust, she wanted to see the box. Now, I don't know if that's something she really wanted audiences to see, as if the box had it had real meaning, or did she want the dancers to be focused and precise about where they move in space? And my guess is it had something more to do with the nature of the focus and the quality of attention that the dancers have in moving. And I think Bill is the same. So it's not important that the audiences see that mark, that shape, but that quality of attention is transmitted to them in the performance context. And I think through this difficult thinking work, like this sort of mental work combined with moving, is also the same, something Wayne is also interested in, a kind of quality of attention. So this is one of the, on the DVD, on the CD-ROM, if you don't know it, you have also examples from the studio. And this is an example of Noah doing room writing, that thing that Bill just talked about. I mean, that idea of, this was, I think somebody was videotaping, and then afterwards they reviewed the videotape, and he described more or less what he thought was happening. You know, that was a chair, I was working with a chair. But all of those very precise marks on, you know, he's not, it's a little bit of a deception to think that he's actually visualizing that chair. But it gives you a taste of the kind of work he's doing mentally. But I think that notion of a mental note as he's moving, it describes probably better what you see there.